Alright, now we are going to be doing our final sketch here. I have my watercolor paper here. Now if you don't have this watercolor paper, that's fine. You can use a mixed media, although that wouldn't have as much of a great result as this kind of watercolor paper here. It works. You just gotta put less water. So when it comes to this this quality of watercolor paper, I believe that this is Master's Touch. Let me go ahead and check. Yes, it's Master's Touch Premium Watercolor Paper. It's a little bit on the pricey side, but it's okay. This retains water very well. And basically, the more the higher quality the watercolor paper is, the better your colors will actually come out, and this doesn't warp as much. So if you want to get this, go ahead and get it. I also see people use Canson's, which is probably a bit of a cheaper brand, I believe. Watercolor paper is a little bit more pricey, but the results look really, really good. Now, mixed media as well also worked. I tried it. I didn't like it as much as watercolor paper because it warps so much and the color doesn't stay as wet as I want it to be, or it doesn't stay as nice and colorful as I want it to be. So I'm using this watercolor paper. So yeah. Anyways, let's go ahead and get started. I have my rough sketch here. So this is what I'm going to be going with. Hopefully you guys can see that. It's hard to see, but that's what I'm going to be doing with my rough sketch. So I'm just going to have it in front of me and just use that as a, just as my reference. So I'm going to be drawing very, very lightly here. In fact, I would probably even use a lighter, now all of them are kind of just how do I say it? I forgot what I was just going to say. I kind of just lost track for a second. Anyways, I'm just going to be drawing really, really lightly. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I'm just going to be drawing really lightly. In fact, I would probably use an even thinner pencil than a 0.5, probably even a 0.3 if there's any. Or I can even use a light color pencil. But, this works for now. Just draw very, very lightly with a very light pressure. So I'm just going to be drawing in my head. Once again, just kind of roughing in the cranium. Very, very lightly, almost to the point where you almost can't see it. Because this is a girl, I want to make her face a little bit cuter, so I'm going to actually make it a little bit more squished. So I have my cross lines here, I have my center line on my face, and I have my eye line roughly around halfway of the face. And I'm just going to narrow those in. And of course, if you don't have we can't really flip back and forth like in digital, so it's kind of hard to see if this is going to be completely symmetrical, but it works for now. Just do the best you can. Once again, if you mess up, don't worry about it because it's always a learning curve. Not every piece is going to be as perfect as you want it to be, and that's the same thing for a lot of my illustrations. I just go very, very carefully, and sometimes I even practice to the point where I'm just yeah, I wouldn't really say I wouldn't really care, but sometimes you just gotta move on, So here we have her neck, which is gonna be a little bit thinner. Make sure it's not too thick, not, where the jawline is. A little bit thinner than that, probably in between where the chin and the jawline meet. That might be a little bit thin, but it's okay. We can always go over it later. So for the nose, it's about halfway. And I like to just put a little dot because it just looks a little bit more innocent that way. In fact, I'm going to actually make her face just a little bit thinner, just so it doesn't look too wide. I don't want to make her face look too wide. Now for the eyes, I'm just going to be drawing some nice, medium, not too open looking eyes. So if you want, you can also draw lines across just to make sure that the measurement is correct, and make sure that the distance between the eyes are 1 eye apart. If it looks a little bit uneven when you rotate this, which will happen, you can always adjust. So what you can either adjust is, kind of fix out the other side, which probably will look a little bit better that way. This needs to be balanced out anyway. And erase using your kneaded eraser. So it's good to rotate sometimes. Here we have the upper lid. And the eyes would be more filled. So it looks like this so far. And if you want to make her eyes look a little bit more like almost like it's closed, you want to kind of fold up the eyes just a little bit more, kind of like a little crescent moon. Just add in the eyes roughly there. So it looks very light, but I hope you guys can see this. Make sure that the mouth isn't too wide either, just around the middle points of the eyes is good. Let's add in a little bit of blush. Let's actually add a little bit of height to her eyes here. It's like so. And if you want, you can also draw in her ears. So her eyebrows are kind of light, so I'm just going to draw them a little bit darker so you guys can see. This is what it looks like on the side. And a little bit wobbly, but I'm going to go ahead and fix this side here. So sometimes it's good to look a little bit farther back. So I'm just going to thicken this side a little bit so it looks a little bit more even overall. Yep, looks better. I'm actually going to make the nose just a little bit higher. And I'm also going to make the mouth a little bit higher just to give it a cuter look. So if you want to get a bit of a thinner look, let me zoom in so you guys can see what the problem is here. If you want a thinner erasing point, go ahead and just kind of stretch out your kneaded eraser and then just dab the lead out. You can see I'm putting a little bit more care in this phase because if I erase too much, then everything becomes a lot messier and the color won't show as well. So the smudge prints from the pencils will disrupt the watercolor. So I'm trying to be a little bit more careful here. Notice how I also rounded out these edges here. I don't want to make it too sharp, just because I want to give that innocent look. I like to round things out. I don't like to make things a perfect edge or perfect corner. So let's add in our hair. There's a little centerpiece. There's the hairline. And you can just draw your sections of hair, big, medium, small shapes. You can even have some stray shapes kind of going forward. You can also draw some overlapping hairs as well. So notice how I'm also making sure that even hair has different sides. So here's the front and there's the back. I like doing that because it just makes it look a little bit more fun in terms of textures. And I'm also adding a little bit of a braid in here as well. And I don't have enough space to actually make a flower crown, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a flower on the side just to give it some nice flair. So if you want to draw flowers, you want to make sure that you have petals overlapping each other. So 1, 2, 3, all kind of going to a similar point. So here's the bud, and I'm just going to be basically circling petals over it. And that's a very simple way to do flowers. It's hard to see, unfortunately. So I'm actually going to make this flower just a little bit bigger with some smaller petals in between, just for some shape language. There. So far so good. It's hard to see, unfortunately, but I'll have to darken it for you guys when I send you the actual sketch for the downloadable resources. So far so good. So you can see the top of the paper is already up here, so that's why I can't add in my flower crown, unfortunately. So sometimes, change of plans. Let's add a little braid here. So I just added a very, very light braid. Kind of just add little diamonds stitched together. Let me zoom out so I can work on a bit of the body. So once we have the face all done, we can go ahead and work on the body a little bit. So the body, her shoulders kind of tilted up, so then her clavicle would lead downward. Her trapezius kind of flows downward more. In fact, I'm actually going to make the shoulder just a little bit smaller because it looks a little bit big here. Either I'm going to put it a little bit closer or make it a little bit smaller. So I think I'm actually going to make it a little bit closer. also going to draw a little bit of her rib cage. So I'm going to draw a square in front. As you can see, very, very lightly. Just kind of measure where her pelvis or her rib cage is. So one hand length down, one hand length, about up to here. That's where her sternum is. One hand length, one hand length. Okay, so that's where her rib cage ends. And then from there, I can add in her chest, which will be a little bit round. And because there's cloth over it, I'm not going to single it out. I'm actually going to lump it together in more of a straight manner. Fortunately, this is so light you can barely see it. Whoops. I left my thing on. I think her shoulder still looks a little bit weird here. So if you want, you can always look at some reference. So instead of, making it more upward, I'm just going to make it a little bit more downward, kind of just a little bit more relaxed. So it's on the same level as the other shoulder. So to block out the rib cage, sorry, not the rib cage, the elbows, just kind of measure out the rib cage. My rib cage ends here. Just go a little bit diagonal, and that's where her elbow is, roughly. I'll make it just a little bit shorter just to kind of give a little bit of insurance. Yeah, I want to draw her arm in front. Make sure it's a thin to thick motion. So this area is always going to be thicker because of the forearm muscles. So let me draw that a little bit darker here. So it looks like this. I actually don't really like the hand this way. I'm even thinking let me think. I mean, I like the swing look. I really do. But I'm almost wondering if maybe it would be better if her hand was more outstretched. Kind of like she's reaching out to you. Like maybe like this. Or maybe she's even holding her dress. I think that actually looks really pretty. So I'm going to just, roughly sketch that out. So if her arm was kind of reaching out here and the dress was out here, that would actually be very, very pretty. So I'm taking like 19 minutes just to figure out a rough sketch. I'll probably have to split the video again. Let's see. What if I have her arm in front? Or maybe up. I kind of like the upward look. So maybe what if her arm was out like this? I actually kind of like that. It's not because I want to hide her hand or anything, but this actually kind of looks a lot more cheerful than I intended. So I'm actually going to stop here for now. This is just part one of the rough sketch, and I'll be right back.